Hello. Around the middle of the 11th century, historians generally agree the Viking Age in Europe came to an end. This was shortly after the age of Knut the Great, a Danish man who was one time also King of England, and Knut's sons Hordenut and Sweyn. Knut was the son of Sven Forkbeard. Sven Forkbeard was the son of Harald Bluetooth, who was the son of King Gorm. Now, going back to Danish King Knut, he ruled around the same time as Olaf Haraldsson, now Saint Olaf, ruled Norway. That was sometime after Olaf Tryggvason, one-time invader of England, ruled Norway until his death in the year 1000. Olaf Tryggvason was the son of Tryggve Olafsson, and according to some sagas, a descendant of Harald Fairhair. Despite his purported relation to Harald Fairhair, he's not to be confused with Olaf Haraldsson, the king of Norway, who is also supposed to be a descendant of Harald Fairhair, and Harald Fairhair is not to be confused with Harald Bluetooth, a Danish king. Other major players of the late Viking era included England's King Ethelred, an Anglo king who was eventually usurped as King of England by Knut. Not completely. Ethelred's son Edmund controlled some of England until Edmund's death shortly after Ethelred's death, which allowed Knut to fully ascend to King of England. There was also Thorkel the Tall, a major military commander whose allegiances sometimes switched back and forth between who was in power, and there was also Adric, another treacherous Anglo whose allegiances often switched back and forth. There was Knut's brother-in-law, Erik of Hladr, Hladr, who ruled some of Norway, much of Norway, with Knut's permission. And again, there was Edmund, son of Ethelred, who died and allowed Knut to ascend to King of England. Did you follow all that? Neither did I. That's why I am happy to introduce a who's who of the late Viking Age. The descendants of King Gorm begin, of course, with Gorm the Old himself, who reigned from about 936 to 958. Gorm is noteworthy for being the first historically recognized king of Denmark. Good for you, Gorm. Let's draw ourselves a little Gorm. There we go. There's Gorm. We hate to detract, of course, from any of Gorm's achievements, but what is particularly noteworthy about Gorm are his descendants, his progeny. Gorm's son Harald Bluetooth succeeded Gorm as King of Denmark, reigning from about 958 to 985. Harald briefly ruled Norway around 970, but the big achievement for which Harald goes down in history is converting Denmark to Christianity. Let's add Harald Bluetooth to the royal line. There he is, with the cross for his Christianity. There are historical sources after Harald Bluetooth's time which suggest that he ruled for 50 years. This is doubtful. Historians largely believe he ruled from around 958 to 985. Like many things about such long ago history, the reasons for Harald's conversion of Denmark to Christianity are disputed and likely to always be a bit of a mystery. Christianity had been sneaking its way into Denmark by way of outside missionaries for centuries before the conversion. It was not completely out of the blue. It's sometimes mentioned that the conversion to a single religion like Christianity may have been beneficial to Denmark's rulers as a way of unifying the country. One missionary named Papo is credited in some sources with converting Harald. Clearly, Christianity's presence in the rest of Europe somehow caused its arrival in Denmark. It may have also served as a point of prestige for Harald among other Christian European rulers. Harald did spend a lot of his rule building churches as well as fortresses and other such fortifications throughout Denmark. It is also possible that the conversion was actually a defensive move to prevent an invasion and more violent conversion at the hands of German rulers. Harald devoted most of his reign to strengthening Denmark. Many roads, bridges, and towns were completed under Harald Bluetooth's reign. He had his father's remains exhumed from their pagan burial place and moved to a Christian memorial in Jelling, in Denmark. Harald had very famous memorial stones cut for his parents at this memorial site. Again, many fortifications were developed to protect Denmark and or perhaps to simply project an air of regal strength. Harald's foreign conquests were limited in scope and success. A lot of his projects in Denmark were funded by taxation of his subjects, and some sources suggest This was a source of tension. Harold even had a falling out with his own son, Sweyn Forkbeard. The precise nature of this is disputed. One historical account, Adam of Bremen's, claims that Sweyn rebelled against his father. Another major account, the Encomium Emme Reginae, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, claims that Harold disinherited Sweyn. Yes, Sweyn Forkbeard. He reigned from about 986 till his death in about 1014, maybe 1013. He did not want to subject Denmark to the heavy taxes that his father did. He wanted to stand out. How else could he raise funds to continue the kinds of projects his father did, though? One answer: plunder England. Yes, England was a ripe target for Viking plunder around the Viking Age, and Sweyn was ready to partake. He had done it even before he took power. And England was ruled by someone unfortunately named Ethelred the unready for a reason. And in fact, he was so unready that shortly before Sweyn's death, Sweyn became King of England. Unfortunately, Sweyn died within about a year of becoming king. Before we move on, let's talk a little more about Sweyn. Adam Bremen, a major historical source who wrote about the Viking era shortly after it ended, wrote that Sweyn was in miserable exile in the last years of his father's reign. Other evidence contradicts this, however. Historical evidence suggests that instead of being in miserable exile, Sweyn actually spent the last years of his father's reign partaking in raids of England. Some readings I reviewed suggest that Sweyn largely wanted to continue his father's projects of economic growth in Denmark, but didn't want to raise taxes so much. This is why he raided England. Other readings suggest that the reasons for Sweyn's plunder of England are more obscure or unknown than that. It seems to have been a pastime with which he was well practiced even before he was king, that's for sure. During his time as king, Sweyn's main nemesis in England was its blundering King Ethelred, dubbed Ethelred the Unready. Ethelred was largely a despised monarch, often unable to keep peace even within his own family during his reign. I have to imagine it was hard, as during Sweyn's time as King of Denmark, Vikings plundered England constantly, each time it seemed coming out of it rich, often because English rulers actually paid off the Vikings to get them to stop raiding. Of course, getting paid off only incentivized the Vikings to return. Apparently the English didn't understand the concept of incentives, though, Adam Smith in his studies of economics still being about 750 years in the future. In the year 994, England paid the Vikings 16,000 pounds of silver to go away. In the year 1002, 24,000 pounds. In 1007, 36,000 pounds. And in 1012, 48,000 pounds. My source for that was A History of the Vikings by Gwyn Jones. The raids were not always the undertaking of people of Denmark only. Evidence from Sweden tells us that Swedes partook in the plunder. In the year 994, Sweyn was even allied with Olaf Tryggvason in raids on England. Olaf would become king of Norway the following year, would marry Sweyn's sister Thyre, Thyre, and naturally, as Sweyn's brother-in-law now, he would become Sweyn's enemy. Forces loyal to Sweyn would take part in the Battle of Svold, or Svold, Svold, in 1000, in which Olaf would die. Also partaking in the Battle of Svold against Olaf Tryggvason was Thorkel the Tall, a Viking military captain who would later partake in the plunder of England. This was before he defected to the side of King Ethelred in 1012, fighting against Sweyn's forces in 1013. It didn't work out, as Sweyn's forces emerged victorious in 1013 in England, and Sweyn was declared King of England that year. Unfortunately, Sweyn died shortly thereafter in 1014.